Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic, Half-Demon Naruto's Dark Bonds Deepen. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. Chapter 4, Naruto, age 14. The blonde Hanyu stretched as he got up out of his bed. His body still a little sore from the previous day's training. Since his kenjutsu training was coming to an end under his purple-haired lover, she was determined to test him in everything with a full-on spar. Yugao did not hold back in the slightest. His own body could attest to that. Sure, he could regenerate nearly any injury instantly, but his muscles still carried over the soreness. Still, he enjoyed it and was thankful for the purple-haired Anbu that took the time to mentor him in how to properly use a sword. Even more thankful when Yugao had taught him her two most prized kenjutsu techniques. The dance of the crescent moon Ryu Mikazuki no Mai and the hazy moon night Kasumi Tasuki. As well as her moon dance sword style, which was something truly beautiful to behold. The style looked exactly as the name implied. An exotic dance, using one's natural flexibility and speed to parry and deflect incoming blows and then retaliate with a fluid motion. Finishing his stretches, Naruto made his way to his bathroom for a quick shower, grabbing a clean pair of boxers and a towel before turning on the cold water. He gave up a long time ago with the hot water since it was always off anyways. No doubt due to tampering from the landlord. Sure, Naruto could report it to the Hokage, but the old man had enough on his plate what with running the village and dealing with the council, and the young Hanyu didn't want to add to it with something as minor as this. Besides, if the blonde really wanted to take a hot shower, all he had to do was go to Anko's apartment, and he would only have to give up his privacy in the shower. Not that he minded in the slightest, since these times were used to alleviate some of their frustrations, though Naruto still hadn't budged on going all the way until he graduated the academy, much to Anko's dismay. The only reason he hadn't just moved in with his mate was because of the village's stupid laws about non-immediate family living with higher-ranked shinobi. Claiming it would put the other students at a disadvantage. Naruto scoffed at that. It was clearly a law that put more favor for the clans of the village than anything about actual fairness between students. The stupid law was the same reason that prevented him from moving in with his other mate, Yugao. True to her word, the Neko Anbu sat down and spoke to Anko about the arranged marriage that Jashin had set up between her and Naruto, and emphasized that the poor blonde was unaware that such an arrangement was made. The snake mistress on the other hand, took it surprisingly well and was almost giddy at the concept of the blonde Hanyu having another woman in his life, citing that he shouldn't get two, because he has to share. It was on that night after everything had settled, that Naruto marked Yugao as his second mate, and turning her into a Hanyu just like him and Anko. Turning off the shower, Naruto smiled at the memory. The only downside was that since most of the civilians already knew about his and Anko's relationship, mostly due to the boisterous snake mistress proclaiming it, he had to keep Yugao and his relationship a secret from the common populace. The blonde frowned at that. He really didn't like hiding Yugao-chan like that, even though the purple-haired beauty told him it was okay. He knew there was one way to get around that, but he needed proof. Hard, concrete proof that no one could deny, namely the council, about his heritage and clan status as a sole survivor of the Uzumaki clan. The Clan Restoration Act, or CRA for short. Originally Naruto had no intention of even looking into it. He was happy with Anko as she was a kindred spirit and knew his pain. However, upon learning that Jashin-chan had arranged the marriage between him and Yugao-chan, he knew it would come up eventually. Shaking his thoughts, Naruto quickly dried himself off and slipped on his orange jumpsuit. Chuckling a little at the groan in the back of his mind. Soon Ari-chan, and you won't have to see them anymore. Naruto reassured the fox girl. I'll even set fire to them after team placements. That's still going to be a week away at least. Ari exclaimed in dismay. We've dressed like this for the past 4 years, what's one more week? Questioned the blonde with a smirk. So, when are you going to mark me as one of your mates? The Kyuubi girl asked in jest, though there was a hint of truth and jealousy behind it. I mean you already marked 3 girls, so when is it my turn? Naruto smiled. Well, the first one was to save her life. I didn't expect her to mark me back. Yu-Gao-chan because Jashin-chan had already arranged it, and the third girl just felt right as she was the first to actually accept me for who and what I am without any outside interference. The blonde answered truthfully. And as for you, Kitsunheim. As soon as I find a way to get you out of the seal, I will mark you. Ari was speechless, as a blush crept across her face at her container's words. I was just kidding. She stammered. I didn't really mean it. No, you weren't, Ari-chan. The blonde smiled. I know you've had a crush on me since we first met. And I promise, I will find a way to get you out. And anyways, you need to get ready. The kitsune stammered, still a little flustered by the boy's proclamation. Naruto only chuckled to himself and finished dressing before taking off out the door. Not bothering to lock it, since it always got busted anyways. Without a word, the teenage Hanyu bounded across the roofs towards the academy with precision and skill of a seasoned shinobi, rather than the academy student he was. It only took the blonde a little under 10 minutes to get to the academy. Leaping down, he shuffled into the school building with the rest of the students. Quickly he entered the classroom and made his way to his assigned desk in the back, waiting for the rest of the class to enter. Normally, he would take out his book to read, but he had long since mastered all of his Fuinjutsu books. Not to claim he was a master in seals by any means, only that he had exhausted his own supply on the subject. Also, he was waiting to chat with someone. One by one, the rest of the class filed in. Kiba entering just after Naruto had taken his spot in the front of the class, trying to flirt with any of the female classmates that was unfortunate enough to have to pass near him. Shaking his head, Naruto instead leaned back in his chair and reminisced about how he came to acquire his third mate. Hinata Hyuga. Jutsu. Training Ground 44, Forest of Death, 3 years ago. A small army of Naruto clones numbering 500 littered the training ground as they practiced a variety of subjects and techniques. 100 was training in a brutal taijutsu that Jashin had given him a scroll for in a martial art from across the seas. This particular taijutsu relied heavily on powerful elbow and knee strikes to quickly incapacitate their opponent, mostly targeting the head and joints. What made training for this particular taijutsu challenging was that it required the user to condition their body for it, oftentimes hitting dense objects like trees and rocks to strengthen the muscle and bones and deaden the nerve endings. Luckily for Naruto, due to his Hanyu physiology already reinforced, he was able to skip this process and go straight to training in the stance and techniques. Off to another side of the training ground, another 100 was training in a different taijutsu that was a stark contrast to the other, more brutal form. Instead, this one relied on precision strikes and speed with a combinations of punches and kicks. Over near a small pond, 50 clones sat reading the same book. Each one on a different section about chakra control and manipulation. On the other side of the pond sat another 50 clones with a different book on various civilian skills that would no doubt come in handy in the future for all the D-rank missions that Anko-chan had teased him about doing when he graduated. Finally, the remaining 200 clones were in the centermost of the training ground training with the various shadow and darkness techniques that Jashin-chan had gifted the boy. These clones were going all out, using every skill they possessed in their free-for-all spar they were currently engaged in. Naruto himself was standing at the edge of the training ground, his body covered in sweat from his training, currently taking a small break to hydrate himself and rest a little before he continued. However, his head to the side and frowned. Someone was watching him train. Without his observer noticing, Naruto had switched himself with his Dakukurin and traveled through the shadows to locate the one who had intruded upon his training. When he came out of the shadows behind the guilty party, he was surprised. "This forest is dangerous, you know." He spoke from behind her, causing the poor girl to let out a shocked yelp and turn on her heel so fast that she fell on her rear. Naruto-kun, she exclaimed in shock of being in such close proximity to him. It appeared to Naruto that while their initial interaction after he helped her with the bullies and the speech he gave to her afterwards had reignited a flame in her to achieve her dream, it also gave her a hero worship of him and had a tendency to stutter and faint when he got too close. "How come you are out here, Hinata-san?" Naruto asked, taking a small step forward, causing the girl to begin to acquire an interesting shade of pink. I, was all the girl got out before she fainted. Looking down at her, Naruto sighed and picked her up bridal style. I am going to need to break her of that, and I have an idea. He smirked. Taking her to the training ground, he set her down softly on the ground and looked over the clones' training. Seeing as the sun was beginning to set, he began to dismiss his clones in small sections before leaving only 2 remaining. One he had henge into the Hyuga heiress and returned to her home in her place under strict instructions to act like she would. Even reinforcing the shadow clone with extra chakra to ensure the foe Hinata would last the night. The second shadow clone he instructed to let Anko and Yugao know where he was and what he planned. Even at the cost of the 2 Hanyu mates teasing him of being alone in the forest with a young girl. Instructions given out, the 2 clones departed with their assignments, leaving the blonde and the heiress alone. An hour had passed before the Hyuga heiress came to the sound of a fire crackling and metal scraping against each other. Opening her eyes, she saw Naruto cooking over a campfire a short distance from her. Slowly she sat up. "You're finally awake," he responded, not looking at her. "Just in time too, dinner is ready." Hinata was speechless as Naruto dished a bowl for her and gently handed it to her with utensils, a soft warning of it being hot. As she held the bowl, she noted how good it smelled as the aroma filled her senses. Silently the 2 ate, until Naruto spoke up. "All right, so this is how this is going to work." The blonde began, looking at his guest. "Despite how you've seen me in class, I am not that oblivious to those around me. I've noticed that you are extremely shy and insecure around me. So tonight we are going to fix that. You are one of 3 people who will see me without my mask on." Tonight, the Hyuga girl stammered, "But it's getting late and I need to get home before." "I've already taken care of that." Naruto interrupted her. "I sent a reinforced shadow clone hanged as you back to your compound. So we have all night to work on your insecurities." How simple. We are going to talk all night. After each hour, I am going to take off a piece of clothing. No, I will not be taking off my underwear. He clarified. Sure, being with Anko-chan had desensitized him a little to shame, but he still had some modesty left. After all my clothing is off, I will start moving a little closer to you. Understand? Hinata could only nod her head. Both excited and nervous at the same time. Very well, let's begin. And so they began to talk throughout the night. They discussed everything, from their hopes and dreams to their childhood experiences. Some of which left Hinata shocked and disgusted at the civilians' actions towards the boy. She had already known about the Kyuubi prior to meeting Naruto, but she knew that the boy wasn't the fox. The only thing the Hanyu didn't tell her was his half-demon status, his relationship with Ari-chan, and his task from Jashin-chan. Those topics would wait until later. True to Naruto's word, after each hour he removed an article of clothing. Until he was eventually exposed to the young girl only in boxers. Eventually as the sun began to rise, both Naruto and Hinata were sitting side by side on the log. The boy still in just his boxers. His plan had worked perfectly, and the once shy Hyuga heiress was broken out of her shell of insecurities. Flashback no Jutsu Dispel. About 6 months after that night, Naruto had told the Hyuga girl everything about him after they had developed a strong friendship. She still had a crush on him at the time, but was no longer the shy, stuttering mess she once was around him. It was then, under her request, that Naruto marked her as his 3rd mate. He made sure that she was well aware of the consequences, and she still accepted. Unlike Anko, Hinata was eager to start learning the shadow and darkness techniques that she inherited from accepting the mark, much like Yugao was. "Morning Naruto-kun," a feminine voice whispered from behind him. "Morning Haim-chan." He smiled, realizing the Hyuga heiress had came in through his shadow. "Don't worry, I made sure no one was watching before I came through." The dark blue-haired girl reassured her mate as she moved to the front of him and sat down on top of the desk just next to him. Like Yugao, he had to keep his relationship with Hinata a secret. Something he had also warned her about as well, though that didn't detour her. As long as he set aside time to be with her and train with her, she was content for now. She also saw it as a bonus as she received some extra training with Anko as well. Naruto wasn't sure if it was a good thing or bad thing that Anko and Hinata had hit it off so well. Though most of their discussions did revolve around him and his body and the things they wanted to do to it. He was pretty sure the snake mistress was corrupting the Hyuga heiress. Especially if her new outfit was anything to go by. Gone was her tan coat and modest appearance. Now the confident heiress was sporting a sleeveless fishnet top with a thick sports bra underneath, though left her stomach in view through the fishnet fabric. Her once baggy pants was replaced with a more form-fitting black Anbu-style pants. A pair of black kunoichi sandals completed the new look. "So, ready for the exams?" she asked. "I'm sure I'll pass, but just barely." He smiled. Hinata could only shake her head in amusement. She couldn't wait for the boy to drop his mask and really start showing everyone how strong he really was. Though he did stress that he would take it slow, and suggested that she did as well. Not to show off too much of what they could do, especially their Hanyu abilities. The Hyuga heiress could see the reason to that request. Naruto planned on passing it off as a Kekkei Genkei, and if she used the same abilities while everyone knew he was with Anko, it would cause no shortage of problems for both of them. On her part, she would be thrown to the Hyuga elders demanding an explanation or just straight out accusing her of soiling the Hyuga blood and branding her with the caged bird seal. And that was only her problems. She was sure Naruto would have to deal with worse, given his social status in the village. "Hey Hinata-chan, I didn't see you come in," Kiba stated as he got up from his desk and made his way towards the two. All the while eyeing the Hyuga heiress up and down, licking his lips. "And what are you doing with this loser?" Once the Inuzuka boy reached the two, he draped his arm over the girl in a possessive manner with a smirk on his face while looking at Naruto, as if daring him to do something. What the feral boy didn't realize was that the blonde didn't have to do anything. Hinata her head to the side and gave the Inuzuka a glare that would freeze the Shinigami's soul. A low, almost inaudible, animalistic growl emitting from her throat. It wasn't loud, but Kiba heard it as well as Akamaru, the latter cowering further back into the boy's coat. "Move your arm, or lose it, dog breath," Hinata growled out. Without hesitating, Kiba quickly removed his arm from the girl and unconsciously took a step back. "All right class, settle down," Haruka's voice yelled out above the noisy classroom, breaking the Inuzuka boy out of his stupor. Haruka had quickly went through the roll call. Once noting that everyone was present, the two instructors began passing out the written portion of the exams. Naruto didn't miss the glint Mizuki had in his eye as he handed the boy his test paper. The blonde immediately recognized the genjutsu placed over it, giving the test the appearance of a Jonin-level test. Ironically, with Anko-chan's and Yugao-chan's tutoring, the boy could easily answer this test just as well. Tapping his finger twice on the paper, he rippled his chakra through the sheet and dispelled the illusion and set to work answering the questions. Purposely answering a few wrong, skipping a few and answering just enough correct to barely pass the written exam. After an hour had passed, Haruka instructed the class to put down their pencils as Mizuki went around to collect the tests. He scowled as soon as he got to Naruto, seeing the genjutsu he placed on the paper had been dispelled. Taking the paper, the silver-haired instructor rejoined Haruka and handed him the stack of sheets to grade while the class was dismissed for their first break. After break, the exams resumed with the next part of the tests. The Academy 3, as it was so endearingly nicknamed. Each student was required to successfully perform a substitution jutsu, kawarimi no jutsu, a transformation jutsu, henge no jutsu, and clone jutsu, bunshin no jutsu. One by one, each student was called into the next room to private demonstrate their ninjutsu techniques. In an anticlimactic way, this was the finale of the exams for the students to earn their forehead protectors. Which made Naruto scoff at how easy the exams were. It was as if the village was just trying to pump out as many shinobi as possible. Relying more on quantity than quality. Shrugging it off, the blonde Hanyu awaited his turn. He didn't have to wait long before his name was called. With a sigh, he heaved himself out of his desk and entered the adjacent room. Again, he could see the look in the silver-haired mont's eye, looking forward to the blonde to fail. The instructor knew the blonde had issues with the clone technique and was banking on the brat to fail. "All right Naruto, perform a kawarimi," Haruka instructed. Nodding, Naruto performed the appropriate hand signs and replaced himself with a chair in the room, before switching back. "Very good Naruto," the scared instructor praised. "Now, perform a henge to look like me." Without hesitating, the blonde transformed into a perfect copy of Haruka. Even down to the tiniest of details. The scared instructor was impressed with the amount of detail put into the henge. So much so, he almost actually believed himself to be the imposter. "Alright Naruto, perform the clone technique," Mizuki instructed, fighting to hide the grin that was threatening to appear on his face. Inwardly smirking, Naruto crossed his fingers and performed the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, much to the shock of Iruka as two solid clones of the boy appeared in a puff of smoke. Mizuki for his part, grit his teeth in fury as his plan to manipulate the boy fell to pieces. "I'll have to improvise then," the silver-haired man thought to himself. "Nah Naruto, that was a Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, how could you perform it?" Iruka inquired, still in shock of an academy student using a B-rank jutsu. "Well you see," Naruto began, scratching the back of his head. "Over the last break I talked to Anko-chan about my trouble with the normal Bunshin jutsu and we discovered my chakra coils are way too big to be able to perform such a low-level technique unless I make enough to fill a small village. So, she taught me the Kage Bunshin instead." Iruka only nodded, accepting the explanation. Not knowing that most of it was completely fabricated, it was true that his chakra coils were too big to perform such a small jutsu, and Anko agreed to go along with the story if anyone asked her. "Congratulations Naruto, you passed." The scared instructor smiled, handing the boy his forehead protector. "Thank you Iruka-sensei, Mizuki-sensei." Naruto bowed and left the room, putting his Hitai-8 on his head. Making a mental note to change the color of the fabric later. Eventually the rest of the class finished their exam with nearly everyone passing. Only exceptions were a group of civilian Uchiha fangirls that ignored their training in favor of their fruitless pursuit of the Uchiha's affection. With the exams over and the school day finished, all the graduates made their way to their respected homes to celebrate with their families. "You graduated, you know what this means." Ari teased from the back of his mind. I know. Naruto chuckled. "That is why I am stopping off to get something to eat. I am going to need all the energy I can get." After quickly devouring a half-dozen bowls of the Kushina special, the blonde thanked the two ramen chefs, giving Ayame a hug before departing and making his way to Anko's apartment. As he neared his destination, he could feel his first mate's excitement and nervousness at the same time. Despite her teasing, promiscuous attitude, and choice of clothing, the bad snake mistress was still a virgin. As he reached the apartment, Naruto knocked 3 times before opening the door and letting himself in. In the living room area was an impatient-looking snake mistress. "So, you graduated, right?" She ground out in anticipation, a blush creeping across her face. For a moment, Naruto contemplated playing with her a little and saying that he purposely failed, but decided against it. She had waited 4 long years for this day to arrive, and he wasn't going to ruin it for her for a prank. "See the Hitai-8," he answered, pointing to the forehead protector on his head. "You better have." Anko replied. Me. Bedroom, now." Naruto could only chuckle as the snake mistress grabbed him and pulled him into the bedroom before throwing him on the bed and locking the door behind her. Joining him on the bed, she crawled over until she was hovering just above him, looking into his cerulean blue eyes. Entranced by them. Meanwhile, the blonde Hanyu stared back into her light brown, pupil-less eyes. He could see the eagerness they reflected as well as hints of doubt. Reaching up, he placed his hand on her cheek to reassure his snake princess. "Take your time hubby Haim." He smiled. "This is both our first time, so let's make it special." Warning. Lemon scene ahead. If you don't wish to read this scene, please scroll down to the next bold text. Warning. Those words were all the snake mistress needed to hear. Lowering her face down, she captured the blonde's lips in a heated, but passionate kiss of 4 years of pent-up sexual frustration. Naruto eagerly returned his kiss, as his hands went to the bottom of her shirt, gently pulling it up. Anko didn't resist as she broke the kiss from a brief second to let her mesh shirt fall over her head, revealing that she wasn't wearing a bra, much to Naruto's delight. However, before the teenager could play with the lady bits in front of him, Anko broke the kiss and leaned up. Her hands shooting towards the zipper on his jumpsuit, and pulling it down. Revealing the black t-shirt he had on underneath it. With a bit of flailing around, Naruto aided his snake princess in removing the orange jumpsuit from him. "Please tell me you're going to stop wearing those abominations," she commented as she tossed the jumpsuit across the room, leaving the blonde in nothing but his black t-shirt and boxers. exposing a chiseled body that jumpsuit kept hidden. I promised Ari-chan I would burn them all after team placements. He replied as he took the initiative and leaned up and captured her lips before turning them both so that he was on top. Breaking the kiss, he maintained eye contact as he began to kiss down her chest, using his left hand to fondle her while his tongue went to work on the other one, causing Anko to arch her back in pleasure as she let out a gasp. Slowly, he removed his left hand from her and trailed it down her stomach before it go to her orange skirt. Undoing the clasps, which required a little fumbling as the buttons didn't want to cooperate with the blonde, he slowly pulled off Anko's skirt and remaining fishnet leggings, leaving the snake mistress completely exposed before him, causing the lavender-haired woman blush at her vulnerability, but didn't shy away from it as she looked down at her mate in anticipation. Not wasting any time, Naruto began to slowly kiss up her inner thighs, using his tongue to lick along her skin. Each stroke of his tongue sent a wave of pleasure through her spine, causing her to grasp at the bed sheets. Eventually, much to Anko's torture and pleasure, the young blonde made his way up to her bare crotch, a faint smile on his face. Really hubby Haim, a snake design. Naruto commented on the pattern in which his mate had shaved into her pubic hair. Well, I am the snake mistress. She replied with a gasp as Naruto plunged his tongue into her womanhood. Sent a flood of pleasure through her body, causing her to arch her back again as she let out a pleasure moan. Naruto continued his oral assault on her entrance, letting his tongue probe in and out of her as he played with her to stimulate her even further, leaving the snake mistress a shuddering mess as orgasm after orgasm rocketed through her body, causing her eyes to roll into the back of her head as she was dragged through a torrent of pleasure. "Ah, Jashin, I'm coming," she exclaimed, as a wave of her climax flooded her nether regions, which the blonde Hanyu greedily lapped up. You're tasty hubby Haim." He smirked up at her while she panted, trying to regain her breath. Moving up her body, he gave her a chaste kiss, allowing her to taste her own essence. Not that she minded. It only took a handful of seconds for Anko to recover and throw the blonde off her and pin him to the bed with her being on top once more. "My turn," she grinned. Not giving Naruto time to reply, she quickly discarded of his boxers, leaving him in a similar state of nudity as she was. Her grin grew further and she inspected the size of his hardened member. "I see I am not the only one with a snake," Anko teased, and she grasped his growing member. For only being 14, it was a respectable 8.5 inches, with a 2.5-inch thickness. Gently, she began to stroke it up and down, eliciting a soft moan of pleasure from the blonde. Smirking as it got the reaction she wanted to hear, she leaned down and began to lick the bottom of the shaft, her sultry eyes locking onto his blue eyes as she continued to work his shift. Watching as an expression of pleasure washed over his facial features. Deciding to move things along, Anko opened her mouth and took the tip of his into her mouth and slowly began to work her way down as she slowly bobbed her head up and down while on it, like it was her favorite dango. Slowly, inch by inch, the snake mistress had managed to take his entire length into her throat, causing her eyes to water slightly. As she continued, it became easier and easier for her to take his entire length. Naruto's moans of pleasure egged her to continue on with more enthusiasm. As such, she began to quicken her speed, using her hand to aid her in bringing him to his own climax. "Anko-chan, I'm about to come," he warned her. This only spurred the snake mistress to double her efforts until finally she was rewarded with a stream of semen shooting down her throat. Clamping her lips around his pulsating, she swallowed everything he had to offer. After almost 30 seconds, Naruto's climax ended, allowing Anko to come up for air, seductively licking the remains of his seed of her lips. That was quite the load, Foxy-kun. She smiled, taking a drink from a bottle of sake that had been sitting on the bedside table. And it was rather enjoyable. I do hope there is more. Smirking, Naruto reversed their positions once more. Looking down in her eyes, he leaned in and kissed her deeply, allowing his tongue to explore her mouth, tasting the sake she had just drank, plum-flavored, he noted. Gently, he positioned himself between her legs, looking into her eyes as he did so. "Are you ready?" he asked with concern. Her only response was to nod. Leaning in once more, he enveloped her mouth with a deep kiss as he pushed himself into her entrance. Tears formed in the snake mistress's eyes as she felt the pressure push into her as the blonde Hanyu's hardened member penetrated her sanctuary before touching her barrier. Breaking the kiss, Naruto looked into his lover's eyes, waiting for a silent confirmation. Receiving a single nod, Anko tightened her hold on him as he drew back and thrust forward, claiming the snake mistress's virginity. Anko let out a cry of pain, squeezing her eyes shut as Naruto kissed her tears away. Whispering into her ear to comfort her, waiting for her permission to continue moving. After a moment of getting used to the size that was filling her insides, Anko brought her mate into a kiss and bucked her hips to give him permission to continue. Receiving permission, Naruto began to rhythmically pump his hips, kissing her deeply as he did so as both began to lose themselves to the pleasure they were drowning in. As they continued, the kisses became more and more feverish as Anko began to plead for him to go faster and harder. It wasn't long before the entire room was filled with her screams of pleasure as the blonde Hanyu pounded into her. I'm almost there, Naruto-kun. Anko panted as she could feel her climax nearing. I'm about to. Me too, Anko-chan. Naruto gasped out as he could feel the pressure build up in his core. Come with me, she whispered into his ear. Come with me, Foxy-kun. Enveloping her in another passionate kiss, they both moved in sync with one another to increase their pleasure. Until finally both at their climax at the same time. Naruto pushed himself in as deep as he could go, his kissing the entrance to the snake mistress's womb as he painted her insides white with his side. On the other end, Anko's eyes rolled into the back of her head as she arched back in pleasure as a tidal wave of pleasure hit her body as she was hit with the strongest orgasm she had ever felt in her life. Literally making her legs go numb. We're definitely doing that again more often. Naruto smiled as he kissed her again. Who says we're done now? Anko grinned, flipping him over and straddling him in a cowgirl position, lowering herself back onto him. Let's test out that famed stamina you have. I just hope we don't overload the seal. He grinned, referencing the anti-conception seal he had made specifically for this day. Though due to his own resolve, he couldn't test the limitations of the seal. He only knew that it would work. Well then, Anko smirked. We'll just have to test that, won't we? Besides, I wouldn't mind a little clutch of snakelets. Naruto could only grin. He knew this was going to be a long afternoon, but he had promised his hubby Haim that he would be all hers today, and he never breaks a promise. Ever. Hours later. In a word, Naruto was exhausted. Anko and him had gone a total of 16 different rounds before they finally had to stop, due to Anko getting called into work at the last minute. Much to the snake mistress's dismay. In that time, they had been in every position imaginable. Though he did feel relaxed. As if all the stress of life had just melted away. Sighing with contentment, he combed his fingers through Yugao's purple hair. Shortly after he and Anko had concluded their activities, though with the later demanding that they were not finished by a long shot, Naruto had sought out his Anbu lover knowing that she wanted to spend time with him as well. Though in a different, more romantic way. Unlike his snake mistress, his sword's mistress wanted to wait until they were officially married before doing anything. Which he greatly respected. Though, that didn't stop the two from teasing each other every once in a while. So, how does it feel to finally graduate, Naruto-kun? Yugao asked as she snuggled herself deeper into his hold. Her back resting against his chest as they looked out over the village from the tree branch they were in. Anticlimactic. The blonde Hanyu replied with a grin. I was a little underwhelmed with how easy the final exams were. No testing of taijutsu or genjutsu. Just do a written test and perform 3 easy ninjutsus and done. Blame the civilian council. Yugao snorted, clearly not happy with the current academy curriculum. They pushed to make it easier for their kids to pass alongside the shinobi clans. Be that as it may, Naruto smiled. With graduating, I am closer to fulfilling Jashin-chan's will. This brought a smile to the purple-haired woman's face. She loved that her fiancé was dedicated to serving her goddess. After all, he was Jashin-sama's champion and was destined to do great things in her name. Though, a little voice in the back of her head was telling her that Jashin-sama had a more intimate plan for her champion. Still, the thought made her smile more. Feeling his mate's happiness, Naruto tightened his hug and placed a kiss on the base of her neck. Just where his mark was located on her, which caused the purple-haired beauty to shudder. As the two enjoyed each other's company, a movement off to the right caught their eye, causing the blonde Hanyu to quirk his eyebrow. Well, that isn't something you see every day. He commented as both of them stood up, watching an orange figure with a large scroll on his back jump through the trees. Naruto-kun, you didn't tell me you were stealing the scroll of seals. The purple-hair Anbu jested. I guess I wanted to surprise myself. He replied with a grin. Anyways, we should probably stop me. You go inform the Hokage. With a nod, Yugao disappeared into the shadows, using her shadow step ability she had inherited from Naruto upon become his mate. Meanwhile, Naruto took off through the trees after his doppelganger, already knowing who it was. So you're finally making your move and framing me for Itachi Mizuki. The Hanyu thought to himself when he felt a tingling in the back of his mind, making the blonde widen his eyes slightly. Jashin-chan wanted this person's soul. With this realization, a feral grin appeared on his face and he doubled his speed to catch up to the imposter. With Naruto, Naruto, why are you stealing the scroll of sealing? Iruka shouted as he chased down his blonde student. None of this made sense in the mind of the scared Chunin. The boy had shown no signs of even thinking to attempt such a thing, let alone actually do it. He had no reason to, since he had passed the test and earned his forehead protector. Isn't it obvious, Iruka-sensei? The kid replied with a grin as he twisted and threw a few kunai at his pursuer, which Iruka easily avoided. The Kyuubi wants more power and I am going to give it to him. Iruka frowned at the boy's proclamation. Now he knew something wasn't right. Naruto shouldn't know about the fox, unless blatantly told him. Even more so, why would a beast of pure energy need more power? Lastly, he noticed the kunai being thrown. Naruto never had a kunai holster on, claiming he didn't need one. That has got to be the worst henge I have ever seen. A voice sounded from the trees ahead of the duo, causing them both to stop. You didn't even get my whisker marks right. They are way more defined than that. Not to mention, there is no way my is that big. Stepping from behind the tree stood Naruto, earning a gasp from Iruka and a glare from his imposter. Shit, he wasn't supposed to be here. Mizuki thought to himself as he dispelled the henge. Am I Mizuki? Why? Iruka stammered, shocked by his friend's betrayal. And why do you smell like snakes? Naruto asked, eyeing the silver-haired man up and down. I was with that whore of yours. The man replied, trying to enrage the boy. However, Naruto only laughed. You know, I might have believed that if I didn't spend all afternoon sating her desires. He remarked, the implications clear, causing Iruka to blush at the mental image. Also, her snakes smell way different, wild and free. Yours smell like a sterile lab. The silver-haired Chunin growled at this, knowing full well what the boy was implying. Iruka seemed to catch on as well as he positioned himself to attack the identified traitor. However, before he could react, Mizuki threw a cluster of kunai with explosive tags at his former fellow Chunin and launched his Fuma Shuriken towards Naruto. Naruto, watch out! Iruka called out in fear for his student, only to leave himself open for the barrage of explosions to send him flying back into a tree, knocking the wind out of him. Naruto only scoffed as the giant shuriken came spinning towards him. With a flick of his wrist, the blonde Hanyu summoned a shadow-like katana with his Dakiburdo ability to deflect the flying weapon with ease, sending it into another tree, embedding itself at least halfway in. Not bad for a demon brat. Mizuki grinned as he turned his attention to the blonde. Naruto, run! Iruka weakly called out, still trying to save the boy. Tell me, do you want to know why the villagers hate you? The silver-haired man smirked as Iruka's eyes went wide as he realized who Mizuki was about to do. Don't listen to him, Naruto. He yelled out, only to be violently backhanded by Mizuki, effectively knocking him out cold. Why do the villagers hate me? Naruto asked, deciding to play around with the fool for a bit longer. It's simple really. The man laughed. It's because you are the Kyuubi. Expecting the boy's mind to be shattered at the revelation, he was instead met with a deadpan look from the blonde before the boy started laughing as if told the funniest joke that only he heard. I'm the Kyuubi, huh? Naruto asked, sarcasm evident in his tone. I suppose this was supposed to mentally break me or something. Newsflash Tem, I've known about the Kyuubi since I was 6 years old. He continued. I mean, kind of hard not to connect the dots when everyone keeps calling me the demon, fox brat, and my personal favorite, the fiend. Not sure where you idiots came up with the last one, guess the usual insults didn't cut it anymore. So you knew all along, guess you are not as big an idiot as I thought you were. Mizuki commented, pulling out his second giant shuriken. Won't matter, I'll kill you now as one last favor to the village before I give the scroll to Orochimaru-sama. Any last words, demon brat? Yeah, Naruto grinned sadistically. Jashin-chan wants your soul. Before the silver-haired Chunin could decipher what the boy had said, a sharp pain erupted through his back and chest. Looking down, Mizuki could see a black-looking blade sticking out from his chest. Craning his neck, he looked behind him only to see a second Naruto standing behind him. Yanking the shadow blade out of him, the second Naruto quickly swung it around, lopping off the head of the would-be traitor. One soul delivered, Jashin-chan. The copy said before dissolving back into the shadows to reattach itself to Naruto. He really loved that ability. The tainted soul of Mizuki delivered, Naruto then turned his attention to his other fallen sensei. Walking over, he quickly checked his wounds before applying a little bit of chakra into him to help wake him up. Groaning in protest, the scarred Chunin opened his eyes and took in his surroundings before snapping up, much to his body's protest. Naruto. I'm fine, Iruka-sensei. The boy smiled. What happened? Where is Mizuki? You were knocked out by the tem. Naruto explained as he walked over to where the large scroll laid and picked it up before returning it to Iruka. I fought him and was forced to kill him. Silence hung in the air as the man took in this information. Naruto had just taken his first life in service of the village, some he himself had never done in all his years of being a shinobi. The man was concerned with how well the boy was taking it. How are you holding up, Naruto? He asked, deciding to voice his concern. It had to be done. The boy shrugged before mentally adding, for Jashin-chan. Still, it was your first kill. He was guilty and corrupt and a traitor to the village with plans to turn over sensitive information to Orochimaru. Naruto explained. I don't feel guilty in the slightest. If anything, I granted him a mercy. Can you imagine how badly Anko-chan would torture him with what he said about her and his admission to serving that snake bastard? Iruka had to shudder at that. The blonde made a very good point. Anko would have made hell itself feel like a day at the spa if she caught wind of what Mizuki had said. Shaking those thoughts away, his attention was turned back to his former student who was now bandaging his injuries. That technique you used to stop his Fuma Shuriken, what was that? That is my Kurozanda, Naruto explained, knowing he couldn't hide it forever and had made plans ahead of time. An extremely rare bloodline that I have only been able to find one scroll on it. I've kept it hidden while I learned more about it. As you saw, I can summon forth weapons through it. It's why I said I never needed a kunai holster or shuriken pouch since I can just materialize them out of thin air. And unlike standard weapons, they don't break or dull. It was at this time that the Hokage and a small squad of Anbu arrived on the scene, including his favorite Neko Anbu. The two briefly made eye contact and gave each other a subtle nod before Naruto approached the leader of the village and handed him the scroll. Mizuki Tem stole the scroll and attempted to frame me for it. He admitted to working with Orochimaru. Iruka-sensei can vouch for me. Naruto began. After Iruka-sensei was knocked out, I was forced to fight Mizuki Tem on my own. In the end I was forced to kill him before he could escape. Hiruzen was shocked. The boy he had considered a surrogate grandson was forced to take a life, just fresh out of the academy. Not even placed on a team yet. The old man frowned at that. No one so young should be forced to take a life. In service to the village or otherwise. Come my boy, let's go talk in my office. Darkness falls. Chapter 5. Hokage's office, 1 week later. The elder village leader sighed as he looked over the photo Naruto had submitted for his shinobi identification card. Gone was the happy-go-lucky smiling face. Gone was the bright orange jumpsuit. Instead the blonde boy wore a black trench coat, a red circle with an upside-down triangle with the kanji for Shadow Fox in the center on the back with various other intricate designs, no doubt custom-made. Accompanying the new jacket, the boy had fitted himself a black sleeveless shirt that was just tight enough to show off his physique but not enough to restrict movement. His hands were adorned with 2 black fingerless gloves with metal plates on the back with the same kanji engraved in them that was on his jacket. A pair of Anbu-style pants, along with combat shinobi boot sandals completed his new look. However, the boy's new appearance wasn't what troubled the old Hokage. It what was behind Naruto in the picture. The boy's shadow had flared up into a fox head just behind him, which had resulted in the poor photographer passing out after the photo was taken. Shaking his head, the elder man thought back of the discussion he had with the boy after the scroll incident. Flashback no jutsu. Hiruzen frowned as he looked over the boy in front of him. So young and had already taken a life for the village, yet showed no mental scarring whatsoever from the event. It was surprising to the aged village leader as even the most seasoned of shinobi had breakdowns after their first kill. Yet Naruto stood steadfast, putting a privacy seal around his office, knowing that sensitive topics were about to be discussed between the two of them. Naruto, about what happened tonight. He began cautiously. How do you feel? You are worried about my mental state, I assume. The boy countered, earning a raised eyebrow from the older man. Truth is, I am fine. I have already rationalized that it had to be done. Mizuki Tem was betraying the village and framing me for his crime. And about his revelation of the Kyuubi. Are you sure you can trust him? Ari asked from the back of his mind, a little concerned with what her container had decided to do. I am sure, Ari-chan. Naruto mentally replied, though I intend to keep our relationship out of it. The latter part caused the Kitsune girl to blush heavily. Thing is, GG, I told Mizuku Tem the truth. The blonde began. I've known about the Kyuubi for years now. And, to an extent, have communicated with it. This revelation shocked the old man, as a sense of fear washed over his face. A multitude of different scenarios ran through his mind of possible outcomes, none of which were good in his mind. Everything from the fox manipulating the boy's mind, to fully possessing the blonde. Naruto-kun, the Hokage began. He hasn't tried to manipulate you or she. Naruto cut him off with a slight smirk. And no, she hasn't tried to manipulate me or even threaten me. If anything, she is more upset with how the villagers have treated me thus far. She. Hiruzen repeated dumbfounded. Yeah, the Kyuubi is female. Naruto scratched the back of his head and grinned. How long have you talked with her? The old man sighed. Since my 6th birthday. The boy answered honestly, almost causing the elder man to fall out of his seat in shock. You've been talking with the Kyuubi since you were 6? He asked in shock. How? Naruto sighed before looking at the old man solemnly. It was after the attack on my birthday. The answer caused the old man to wince in response, remembering that dreadful night. It was a sheer surprise to the elder village leader that the boy wasn't mentally scared from that night. It still woke him up in the middle of the night at times. She saved me that night and healed my wounds. Naruto continued, opting to leave out the bit about Jashin-chan also having a hand in his survival for that night. While I was unconscious, we talked and came to an agreement since both of our lives are intertwined together and make the best of the situation. I see, was all Hiruzen could say. Slowly digesting the information he had been given. To be honest, he was glad the boy wasn't broken over the burden he was forced to carry. And you say she has not tried to influence you in any way? That is correct, GG. The blonde smiled. We came to an agreement. She helps me by giving me some of her chakra and heightened senses. I make my mental landscape a bit more comfortable for her. Is this how you were able to use those abilities Iruka told me about? No, Naruto replied with a sigh. That was my Kurozanda Kekkei Genkei, or dark blood bloodline, if you will. I have never heard of such a bloodline. The old man stated, clearly intrigued by this development. I am not surprised. I awakened it the same night I met the Kyuubi. The blonde Hanyu continued, reciting what he had rehearsed for when his abilities would come to light. There was very little I could find on it. To the point that we have more information on the fabled Rinnegan than we do on my bloodline. I only found one scroll mentioning it in our library. I can bring it tomorrow if you wish. That would be appreciated. The old man smiled. What exactly does this bloodline do and how rare would you say it is? As for what it can do. From what I have learned with it and mastered to a comfortable level, I can manipulate the darkness element into hard weapons that are imbued with chakra. Even though it takes no chakra to use my Kurozanda. Naruto explained. Aside from weapons, I can melt into the shadows and use them to travel to places I have been. This is how I have avoided after my 6th birthday. As for how rare it is, from what I found only one person in a millennia has had it at any given time. Once again, Hiruzen was disheartened by the reminder of that fateful day. Though he hid it as best he could. If there was something to take away from it, was that the boy had awakened a very useful ability to aid him on his journey to become one of the greatest shinobi in the elemental nations and eventually greatest Hokage ever. Thank you for trusting me with this information, Naruto-kun. The old man smiled. Why don't you head home? Team placements will be next week. And don't forget to get your photo taken for your shinobi card. Naruto thanked the old man and as a showcase of his abilities, melded into the shadows and disappeared completely, leaving a stunned but grinning Hokage. Flashback no jutsu dispelled. Setting the photo back down on top of the open file, he looked across at the boy in question. Are you sure you want this photo? He asked. It could give the villagers the wrong idea. Would you prefer I use red and white war paint? Naruto countered with a grin. Besides, the Kyuubi is part of who I am. So I shall embrace it and take away the power of the villagers' insults. Also, since I am wearing this headband. The blonde gestured to his forehead protector. I am fully legally allowed to defend myself if anyone gets any stupid ideas. I believe I owe a few a stay in the hospital. Hiruzen could only chuckle at that. It was true, there were a number of villagers that had escaped his judgment after such attacks on the boy. I understand Naruto-kun, he continued to chuckle. Just do not do anything unless acted upon first. If you have trustworthy witnesses, all the better. Don't worry GG, I will only attack if I am attacked first. Naruto replied. Very well, head to the academy. The Hokage instructed as he turned back to the massive pile of papers that seemed to keep multiplying whenever he wasn't looking. Team placements will be starting in an hour and a half. Thanks GG, the boy stated as he moved towards the door. Oh, why don't you use shadow clones to help with the paperwork? With that, the blonde disappeared out the door, leaving a stunned village leader. Muttering why he never thought of that before. After contemplating banging his head on the desk for several minutes for not thinking of using the shadow clone technique. Academy. Naruto made it to the academy with plenty of time to spare. As he entered the classroom, the chatter amongst the other graduates suddenly ceased as they took in his new appearance. The blonde Hanyu paid no heed to them as he made his way back to his usual seat. Stop trying to copy Sasuke-kun, Naruto baka, exclaimed the pink-haired girl as she marched up to where his desk was. Which to her surprise earned a nod of agreement from her former friend and current rival. I wasn't aware the Uchiha had a trademark on the color black, Sakura-san. Naruto countered, pulling out another book he had come across of more advanced fuinjutsu. He doesn't. The girl stammered, a little thrown off by the casual manner the dead last of the class had brushed her off. But that doesn't mean you're going to be cool because you start dressing like him. Naruto shrugged before casting a glance towards the pinkett. First off, the only similarities in our clothing is the color black. That's it. Secondly, your precious Uchiha is over there, go bother him and leave me alone. Not waiting for a reply, he turned his attention back to his book. This only served to infuriate the pink-haired girl even more as she drew back a punch and aimed it towards his head. However, she and the rest of the class were shocked, aside from Hinata, when he effortlessly caught her first and twisted her arm with just enough pressure to restrain her from moving further. I won't tell you again Sakura-san, he replied without looking up from his book. Leave me alone. With a slight push, he let her fist go. Wisely she retreated to her desk unsure what had happened and how it happened. Naruto was dead last, yet he caught her fist without even looking up from the book he was reading. I hope I am on the same team as Naruto-kun. Hinata thought with a smirk. I want a front row seat to how everyone is going to react now that he isn't hiding behind his mask anymore. Slowly, the chatter began to continue amongst the graduates. The main topic now being the change in the dead last's behavior as well as appearance. Even the last Uchiha showed mild interest in the blonde's change. After some time, Iruka entered the classroom alone, much to the surprise of the rest of the class. Iruka-sensei, where is Mizuki-sensei? Asked one of the students. Is he sick? No, he isn't sick, answered the instructor. A week ago, Mizuki attempted to betray the village, even going as far to frame Naruto here for the crime, and was killed. This earned a round of gasps, with a handful of the students looking towards where Naruto was sitting, still reading his book. And it was Naruto who was the one who stopped and killed Mizuki while I was injured. Iruka stated proudly. Told you Iruka-sensei, I just did what had to be done. The blonde replied before closing his book and putting it away. Finally noticing all the stares he was receiving. Some were in disbelief while others were in shock, and even a handful were in awe. There's no way that Dobi fought and killed a Chunin. Kiba shot up. Are you calling me a liar? Iruka challenged, leveling his gaze on the Inuzuka boy, causing him to shrink back. If anyone has any questions about the incident, the Hokage has it on public record that you may view. Now then, on with the team placements. The scared Chunin stated as he took out a paper and started listing off the teams and their Jonin senseis. Team 7 will consist of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Naruto Uzumaki. Your Jonin sensei will be Kakashi Hatake. Upon hearing her name after Sasuke's, Sakura exclaimed that true love conquered all obstacles, much to the annoyance of the last Uchiha. Though upon hearing Naruto's name, she groaned about being stuck with the dead last. Despite being told that the blonde was the main reason the traitor Mizuki failed to defect from the village with sensitive information. She just simply refused to believe the boy was capable of such a feat and simply marked it up as being over-exaggerated at best. Team 8 will be Shino Aburame, Hinata Hyuga, and Kiba Inuzuka. Your sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi. Mr. Inuzuka, I would get all perverted thoughts out of that head of yours. Your sensei will not tolerate it in the slightest, and she is best friends with Anko, whom I trust you have met before. Kiba immediately shrunk back in his seat. All joy of being on the same team as his mate, Hinata, away. Still, with being on the same team and away from that Dobi, Hinata would see just how much stronger he is than that loser Naruto she always hung around with. He would show her what a true alpha is made of. One by one, Iruka listed off all the teams before instructing them to wait for their senseis to arrive. Slowly, each Jonin sensei arrived and called for their teams until finally only 3 graduates remained in the classroom. A brooding Uchiha, an irritated Banshee, and a bored Hanyu. Naruto of course had heard about Kakashi and his habits from Yugao. In short, she didn't have much respect for the man since he was always reading porn in public and had a bad habit of being late to everything that he didn't think was worth his time. Though she did acknowledge his skills as a shinobi. That was about the only thing she respected him on. Knowing that it was still going to be a good 2 hours or more before their sensei would decide to show up, Naruto relaxed and retreated into his mindscape. Naruto's mindscape. As soon as the blonde Hanyu materialized into his mindscape, he was immediately pounced upon by the giggling Kitsune girl as she wrapped him in a firm hug. Hey Ari-chan. Naruto smiled as he returned her hug and giving her a kiss on the cheek, which caused the poor fox girl to blush. Afternoon Naruto-kun, she stammered. So, I have some good news. He grinned again. I think I have a temporary way to get you out of the seal. At this, the Kyuubi girl began to squeal in excitement at the prospect of being about to get out and stretch her legs and maybe even a little more, she thought with a lecherous grin. Before you get excited, it's not perfect and only temporary but should work. Naruto warned. He didn't want to get her hopes up only to have it not turn out the way they both hoped it would. The new Fuinjutsu book I got this week had some interesting techniques in it. One of which leads me to believe I can tamper with the seal slightly to allow you to possess one of my shadow clones. Ari was speechless. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. However, she was also worried and it showed on her face. Tampering with the existing seal carried with it a plethora of risks. One miscalculation and it would kill her host, despite his blessings from Jashin. I know what you're thinking Kitsune Haim, and I share your concern. He acknowledged, knowing the risks involved with tampering with the seal. Which is why I am not taking this lightly or rushing into it. At this point, the fox girl had her head down, hiding the tears of joy that were cascading down her cheeks. Until she felt a finger on her chin gently lift her head up to look into his blue eyes. I promised I would get you out, he proclaimed as he brought her into a firm hug, still looking into her red-slit eyes. Then, I can really hold you in my arms. To her shock, Naruto leaned in and kissed her full on the lips, sealing his promise to her. Thank you, Naruto-kun. She smiled, wiping away her tears once more after they had broken the kiss. Also, I think Anko has some things she wants to experiment with you involved. He grinned, causing the poor fox girl to blush at the implications. Anyways, I should leave. I can feel my sensei's chakra approaching. Not to mention that Uchiha brat keeps staring at you. Ari smiled. I'll have to tell him I don't swing that way. He smirked before fading away from his mindscape, the giggling of the kitsune girl echoing in his ears. Real world. Slowly Naruto cracked his eyes open, and sure enough, Sasuke was looking at him out of the side of his eyes, though doing a piss-poor job of hiding it. All the while, Sakura was staring at the raven-haired emo with a dreamy look in her eyes. No doubt fantasizing about the boy actually talking to her for once. I don't swing that way. Naruto spoke up, so kindly stop staring at me. Sasuke scoffed and turned away a while Sakura's face turned red. Infuriated that the idiot would even make such an insinuation about her Sasuke-kun. However, before she could scream at the blonde, an older man appeared in the doorway with gravity-defying silver hair. Yo! The man greeted as if he wasn't 3 hours late. My first impression is that, I hate you all. Meet me on the roof in 5 minutes. With that being said, the silver-haired Jonin shunshined away in a swirl of leaves. Getting out of his desk and stretching, Naruto made his way towards the door. For a moment he contemplated using his shadow step to get a rise out of his teammates but decided against it. They would all see what he could do soon enough. At least to a certain extent. Falling into step at the back of the line, he followed the two up to the roof. Academy rooftop. Once on the rooftop, each situated into a comfortable position, Naruto opted to just lean against the wall near the group while the brooding emo sat on a lone pillar stub to ensure the pink-haired banshee couldn't sit with him. Sakura instead opted to sit on the floor, between Kakashi and Sasuke. Now that we are all here, let's introduce ourselves. Kakashi I smiled at the trio. Why don't you go first to show us how to do it? Sakura suggested, earning a deadpan look from her sensei as if to say, you don't know how to introduce yourself. Very well. Kakashi smiled through his face mask. My name is Kakashi Hatake. I'm the kind of person who doesn't feel like talking about his likes or dislikes. My dreams for the future are none of your business. But, I have lots of hobbies. You're up, Pinky. Sakura scowled at her nickname, but continued anyways. My name is Sakura Haruno. My favorite thing is, well, it's not a thing. It's a person. A boy. And that boy is. My dream is too. She squeals, much to the annoyance of the others around her. And I hate Ino Pig and Naruto Baka. Geez, did I piss in your cereal or something? Naruto asked, unsure why she would hate him. If he hounded after her like a lovesick puppy constantly asking for dates, he could understand. Anyways, moving on. Kakashi interrupted before it could escalate. Your turn, Sasuke. HN. The emo grunted. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I don't have any likes or dislikes. But I do have a goal. I will kill a man and avenge my clan. Sasuke-kun is so cool. Inner Sakura gushed. He has the personality of an ice cube. Naruto thought to himself with a frown. The hell do his fangirls see in him anyways? Who knows? Ari commented, equally as perplexed. Last up is you, Blondie. Very well. Naruto began, ignoring the nickname given to him. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My likes are training, learning new techniques, and spending time with my Harem. Purposely leaving it vague since he called all his girls his Harems. My dislikes are those who let arrogance blind them, those that don't take their training seriously, and those that only try to use others and rapists. My dream is to make someone very precious to me proud. And learn more about my bloodline. His introduction contradicts his academy file. Kakashi noted as he eyed the blonde before him. No mention of becoming Hokage and claiming he has a bloodline. And who is this mystery person he is fond of that he wants to make proud? You have a bloodline, Dobi. Sasuke asked in a demanding tone. Naruto, you shouldn't lie about having a bloodline just to feel special. Kakashi chastised the blonde. I wasn't aware you got to dictate who gets a bloodline and who doesn't. I must have missed that memo. Naruto coolly responded with a shrug, earning a glare from the masked Jonin. And yes, I have a bloodline. It's called Kurosunda. And what does it do? The Cycloptic sensei inquired, ignoring the blonde's earlier jab. Manipulation over shadows and the darkness element. Naruto replied. If you want clarification, the Hokage knows about it and has the only scroll I could find about it. Kakashi frowned at this, but shrugged it off. Anyways, meet at training ground 7 at 6 in the morning for your genin test. The silver-haired Jonin instructed. Oh, and I would recommend not eating unless you want to throw up. Wait, what do you mean genin test? We passed, didn't we? Sakura shrieked, causing both Naruto and Sasuke to cover their ears. You passed the academy test to see if you are good enough to be considered genin. The man smiled. I will warn you, the test tomorrow has a 66% fail rate. Ya nay. Not waiting for his genin to reply, Kakashi shined away, leaving an annoyed Sakura, an uncaring Uchiha, and an apathetic blonde. Naruto had already assumed something like this was going to happen, and was looking forward to seeing what the test was. Well, I will see you tomorrow at 9, he remarked. Oh, and eat a good breakfast. Like Kakashi, he didn't wait for a reply and disappeared into the shadows, using his shadow step ability. Much to the shock of his two teammates. Hey Sasuke, do you want to go out on a date? Sakura asked hopefully after they snapped out of their shock. No, was the emo's quick reply as he walked away, leaving the pink-haired girl alone with her thoughts and rejection. Next morning, 8:45 a.m. After a restful night's sleep and a hearty breakfast, Naruto made his way to the designated training ground. Only to find his two teammates there, slouched over. Exhausted and irritable. Clearly, they ignored his suggestion. You're late, Sakura shouted. No, I said I would be here at 9. Naruto pointed out. Our sensei has a habit of being late to everything. So I just showed up closer to the time he would decide to grace us with his presence. Sakura only scoffed and sat back down against one of the poles. Not even caring if she was close to Sasuke or not. With a shrug, Naruto leaned back against the remaining pole and pulled out his Fuinjutsu book as he awaited their illustrious sensei's arrival. It would be another hour before the silver-haired Jonin arrived, to find two passed-out genin and the remaining one casually reading a book. Though he couldn't make out what the topic was before Naruto sealed it away. Well, my cute little genin. Kakashi beamed as both Sasuke and Sakura roused from their sleep, each glaring at the silver-haired man. You're late. Sakura yelled with more force than when she yelled at Naruto. Ma. Kakashi waved her off. You see, there was a black cat that crossed my path, and then I had to help an old lady. Bullshit. The pinkett seethed. Anyways, the man ignored her, turning his attention to the rest of the team. The test today is simple. All you have to do is get these bells from me in 2 hours. Holding up a string with only 2 bells attached to them. But Kakashi-sensei, there are 2 bells and 3 of us. Sakura pointed out. Correct. The masked Jonin smiled. Which means one of you will be sent back to the academy. So that's his plan. Naruto inwardly smirked. The true purpose of this test is teamwork. But he is using a divide-and-conquer tactic by making us fight each other for a limited resource. The test starts. Now. Immediately both Sakura and Sasuke disappeared into the trees, leaving on Naruto standing across from their sensei. His black trench coat flapping in the wind as he seized up his sensei. To be honest, he had no doubt he could take the masked Jonin. He has, after all, gone toe-to-toe with a goddess. Even if she did hold back. However, Naruto had no intention of tipping his hand just yet. You know, this is where you are supposed to hide. Kakashi stated, not looking up from his orange book. Maybe, but I have a reputation for being unpredictable. The blonde smirked. Upholding that reputation is likely to get you killed in the field. The silver-haired sensei replied, still not looking up from his book. I'm sure so many will mourn me the day that happens. The Hanyu shrugged, earning a frown from his sensei. Without warning, Naruto flicked out his wrist with 2 black objects shooting out at a high rate of speed. Though Kakashi easily deflected the 2 projectiles before they could reach him. However, for a split moment he did look up from his book. Unsure as to where Naruto had acquired his weapons from. Not having seen him wear a kunai holster or shuriken pouch. These are possibly duplicates. The masked Jonin thought to himself as he studied the blonde in front of him. Probably using them as a distraction. Pretty well thought out for the dead last of the class. Once again, Naruto repeated his attack, though this time with more kunai and at a higher rate of speed. This time, however, the silver-haired sensei opted to hesitate until the last second when his senses screamed at him to avoid the attack. In a blur, he deflected many of the incoming projectiles. though still managed to receive a gash on his arm where one tore through his defenses. Eyes wide, Kakashi immediately came to the realization that these kunai Naruto was throwing were solid and a threat. Now that I got your attention. Naruto grinned as he crouched and launched himself towards the elder shinobi. The masked Jonin was surprised at the strength and speed the blonde was using as he jumped back and deflected and blocked the strikes that came at him. However, Naruto's speed and power were impressive, forcing Kakashi to actually put his book away and focus on the fight. The masked Jonin was considering using his Sharingan eye with the way the blonde kept him on the defensive. However, suddenly the Naruto he was fighting poofed in a cloud of smoke, revealing it was a shadow clone. A shadow clone, Kakashi mentally exclaimed, clearly shocked by the development. How did he know it? When did he create it? With Sasuke. The last Uchiha was livid. He refused to believe the sight that was before him. The dead last Dobi was not only holding his own against their Jonin sensei, but actually keeping him on the defensive. Worst of all, it didn't even look like the blonde was trying in the slightest. Which only angered the raven-haired boy further. There is no way that Dobi should be that strong. He seethed to himself. That power should belong to me, so I can kill Itachi. A dark smirk crept across his lips. I will find out what makes that loser so strong and take it for myself. With Sakura, the cherry blossom was beside herself as she watched the events unfold from her hiding place, hidden in the trees. Naruto Baka, the dead last, was taking on Kakashi-sensei as if it were a light spar for him. It was even more surprising with the Naruto in the field suddenly dispelled, revealing itself to be a shadow clone. Who knew Naruto was so strong? Inner Sakura stated. I dare say he may even be stronger than Sasuke-kun. There's no way Naruto Baka is stronger than Sasuke-kun. Her outer self vehemently denied. That little display says otherwise. Inner laughed. Though now that I think of it, Naruto is kind of cute. Especially with those whisker marks. I wonder how the rest of him looks since he is always hiding his body. I bet he is a hunk. Shut up. Shut up. Sakura shook her head, trying to ignore her inner self's monologue. I love Sasuke-kun and we are destined to be together. Pissed, Sakura-san. A voice came from behind her. Eyes wide, she slowly turned around to see her blonde teammate perched on the tree branch with her. She would have screamed in shock if the boy hadn't covered her mouth, preventing her from doing so. Don't scream, he said as he released her. What do you want, Naruto Baka? She glared at him, though quickly blushed now that she was up close to his face, due to their proximity to each other. Those whisker marks do make him look cute, she thought to herself, before shaking that line of thinking away. If Naruto had noticed, he gave no indication that he did. We need to work together if we want to pass this test, he bluntly stated. Why should I help you? She shot back defiantly. Besides, Sasuke-kun will easily pass this test once he gets the bells from Kakashi-sensei, and then him and I will be on the same team. Tell me, Sakura-san. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at her ignorance. Supposed smartest kunoichi in the class, yet she hung on to her delusions. Have you ever seen a two-man cell? The pinkett opened her mouth to reply, but closed it. Unable to think of any team that only had two members. Exactly, all teams are three-man cells, with the odd team getting a fourth member. Naruto pointed out, even if a team loses a member due to injury or death, they are quickly filled with a suitable replacement. The only exceptions are apprenticeships. Okay, so how are we going to work together? She relented with a heavy sigh. And does Sasuke-kun know? Sasuke is too prideful to openly accept help. The blonde explained, holding his hand up when he saw she was about to defend her obsession. So, when he goes to fight Kakashi-sensei, I will help him so it will at least appear we are working together. While Sasuke and I are fighting sensei, you sneak up on his left and go for the bells. Sakura blinked at how well thought out this plan was. Why his left side? She asked, a little confused. Why not just come up behind him? If you noticed, he wears his Hite 8 over his left eye, giving him a blind spot. He pointed out. So while Sasuke and I have him distracted, you should be able to sneak in and get the bells. Fine, but if this doesn't work I am beating you into the ground. She threatened. If this doesn't work we're all going back to the academy. He countered. Well, she would. Kakashi-sensei is already playing favorites with the Uchiha, so I would full expect him to pull some strings to get him as an apprentice since Hitaki holds the dog summoning scroll. And I could easily become hubby Haim's apprentice since she already let me sign her snake summoning scroll. However, the Pinkett didn't need to be aware of that. With Kakashi, the masked Jonin frowned. He had hoped that there would at least be some form of teamwork between his genin, but so far only Naruto had faced off against him. It still troubled the silver-haired Jonin that the blonde had not only kept him on the defensive in a pure taijutsu match but had also drew blood from his ranged attack prior. Fortunately it wasn't deep, but it did sting. Looking up from his book, he spotted his next challenger. Sasuke Uchiha. Let's see what he does. Kakashi thought. Taking after Naruto and attacking me head-on. The masked man asked lazily. PFF'd, I am nothing like that weakling. The Uchiha scoffed. And I will be taking those bells. The Uchiha then quickly withdrew a series of hand seals before bringing his hand up to his mouth. Kaiten. Gokaku no Jutsu, Fire Release, Great Fireball Jutsu. Sasuke shouted as a huge fireball erupted from his hand, barreling towards Kakashi. When the flames died down, it was revealed that the masked Jonin had replaced himself with a log. Looking around, the Uchiha felt the ground move from underneath him. Not bothering to look down, the raven-haired boy jumped into the air, narrowly avoiding a grasping hand from the silver-haired sensei. Flipping in the air, Sasuke landed on his feet and charged towards the masked shinobi. The Uchiha sent a flurry of punches and kicks towards Kakashi, each one being blocked or deflected, while the silver-haired Jonin would read his book. A stark difference from his taijutsu exchange from Naruto. Though, he was forced to focus more on the fight when Sasuke had twisted himself in a half-flip while his kick was blocked, and actually touched the bells. Seeing his attempt fail, Sasuke pushed himself away from his sensei and settled back into his Uchiha-style fighting stance. As the Uchiha launched another assault, Naruto bolted out of the trees and attacked Kakashi high, seeing as Sasuke was already attacking low. This is interesting, Naruto seems to be working alongside Sasuke. Kakashi thought to himself as he avoided and blocked the oncoming strikes. Though his previous encounter with the blonde had him worried. I don't need your help, Dobi. Sasuke stated, glaring at the blonde. Noted, was all Naruto countered with as he moved along with the Uchiha to re-engage their sensei. While the two boys engaged the masked Jonin, the blonde Hanyu took care as to not make any move towards the bells. He did this for two reasons. 1. To not antagonize the Uchiha, knowing that the emo's pride wouldn't take it well if Naruto went after the bells. Secondly, he needed to make sure Sakura was included in this plan. Even if Sasuke was unaware of it. As the two boys kept the silver-haired Jonin engaged, the Pinkett crept out of her hiding spot and got closer to the action. Coming in from the left, just as Naruto had suggested. To her surprise, the plan was working perfectly as she was able to get just beside Kakashi and made a reach for the bells. Until she suddenly found herself in an entirely different location, and Naruto was where she once was. Just in time to receive a powerful punch from Sasuke. Sakura didn't know what to make of what she had just witnessed. Did her Sasuke-kun purposely attack her just so she couldn't get the bells, or did Naruto switch places so he could get the bells himself? None of it made sense to her. With little effort, Naruto picked himself up and dusted himself off, shooting a glare towards the Uchiha, whom only looked at him smugly. The blonde Hanyu would have done more, if not for the sound of a bell ringing in the distance, signaling the time frame for the test was over. Well, that concludes this test. Kakashi stated as he looked over his group of genin. And you each failed to get the bells. Both Sasuke and Sakura balled up their fists, though Naruto remained relaxed. He knew they had at least in some capacity accomplished the true purpose for the test. So unless the man was going to pull some bullshit, the blonde knew they had passed. I must say, I was worried about you three. He continued. However, in the end, you three did work together. Which was the true purpose for this test. At this official revelation, Sakura's mouth dropped as she cast a glance over towards Naruto. How did he figure it out? Sasuke, you showed great skill in your taijutsu, keep up your training. The masked Jonin smiled before turning his attention towards the blonde. Naruto, your brashness could have endangered your team due to you rushing into the fight. Be aware of that in the future. Naruto only scoffed at it. He could already tell his sensei was going to play favorites to a severe degree. His first clue was during the introductions. Kakashi had given both Sakura and him nicknames, though he called the emo by his given name. Anyways, congratulations on passing. You are now officially, Team 7. He smiled. The rest of the day is yours. Report to the Hokage Tower tomorrow at 7 a.m. to begin missions. With that, the silver-haired Jonin shined away to give his report to the Hokage, leaving his genin alone. So, want to go get something to eat to celebrate passing the test? Naruto openly offered to his newfound team. Not that he cared and would honestly prefer not to be anywhere near the Uchiha after the stunt he just pulled. Like I would want to waste time with you losers. The Uchiha grunted as he walked away from the two. Naruto only shrugged and walked in the separate direction to where Ichiraku's was. Not bothering to see if Sakura was following him or not. He had left the invitation open, it was up to her if she wanted to take him up on his friendly offer. It didn't take long for the blonde Hanyu to make his way to the ramen stand. Taking his usual seat, he greeted the father and daughter duo. Noticing a blush on the young woman's face, though he said nothing. However, it did make him feel bad that he couldn't return her feelings. At least not just yet. He made a note to put Ayame at the top of the list once he was able to enact the CRA on himself. In the meantime, he promised himself that he wouldn't string her along or play with her emotions. Hello Naruto-kun. Ayame greeted happily. Hey Ayame-chan. He smiled, earning himself another blush from the girl. 6 Kushina specials, please. And a small miso ramen please. The pinkett ordered, as she sat down next to Naruto. A little embarrassed about being her. Afraid people would get the wrong idea. Naruto-kun, is this a girlfriend? Chuki teased, earning a glare from both Ayame and Sakura. No Oji-san. Naruto quickly shot that notion down. This is just a teammate. We are celebrating passing our final test. Why such a small bowl? The brown-haired ramen chef waitress asked curiously. I'm on a diet, Sakura answered, earning a quirked eyebrow from both Naruto and Ayame. Why? Asked Naruto. Because Sasuke-kun likes thin girls. She stated, glaring at the blonde. And just so you know, I am only here because you offered to celebrate being a team. So don't think for a second that this is a date. Ayame only rolled her eyes at the pink-haired girl's antics and disappeared into the kitchen to prepare the orders. Naruto for his part only shook his head and sighed. Okay, in reverse order, while you are cute. This caused Sakura to blush, a bit taken back by the compliment. I am already engaged to Anko-chan, my hubby Haim. As well as Yugao-chan. Also, I already shot down the old man for even implying you as anything other than a teammate. He continued. Secondly, did Sasuke himself tell you he liked thin girls? Well, no, she answered, still blushing over his compliment. Not even Sasuke had called her cute. So how do you know he likes thin girls? Naruto countered. Just how much do you know about him? Sakura had no real answer for this. Both her and Ino, and the hordes of other fangirls had all started dieting when a rumor began to circulate that the last Uchiha would only date skinny girls. None of them had questioned it. Honestly, dieting is harmful for a kunoichi. He continued, ignoring the glare he received from Sakura. You will never be at peak condition and will lose energy a lot faster. Making you a liability for the rest of the team. Now, if you train like you should, you won't have to worry about gaining any weight because your training will burn off all calories you take in. So what, I should just give up on Sasuke-kun? The cherry blossom inquired with sarcasm. If you want to pursue him, go ahead. Naruto shrugged. But don't endanger yourself doing it. Sakura frowned at this. It sounded like he was actually concerned for her well-being. This was something new to her as she was used to the constant rejection and apathy from her obsession, and even her parents didn't question her choices or try and change her mind. So what should I do then? She asked. First off, ignore rumors. Rumors are a dime a dozen and are hardly ever true. The blonde boy stated. Secondly, try to get to know him on a personal level. Take for instance Anko-chan and myself. We literally know everything about each other. Our dreams, our goals, and even some of our odd quirks we have. In a word, Sakura was shocked. She had half expected the blonde boy to tell her to give up altogether on Sasuke and maybe even curse him instead. Though perhaps that later part was due to being around Kiba too much, since her seat in class was near his. However, to see just how much he understood about the importance of a strong relationship surprised her. She was shaken out of her thoughts when their orders arrived. Thanking Ayame, both began to dig into their respective meals. Sakura was a little worried about the scent coming for the blonde's bowl, almost making her eyes tear up from all the spices and chilies in it. However, one thing was pestering her. Well, with a little goading from her inner self. Naruto. She spoke, leaving out her usual insult to his name. What happened during the bell test? Why did you switch places with me? Naruto could only sigh, he knew she wasn't going to take this well. You want the truth? He asked, seeing her nod her head. When you were reaching for the bells, Sasuke saw you and went to punch you instead of Kakashi-sensei. I switched myself with you to take the hit, so you wouldn't get hurt. Sakura was silent as she digested what the blonde boy had just told her. Deep inside, she knew it was true but she just didn't want to admit it. Maybe it was an accident. Yes, it was an accident. Sasuke-kun would never do that to her. She decided to voice her thoughts. Maybe it was an accident. She offered, causing Naruto to raise his eyebrow in response. Maybe. He relented, even though he knew it wasn't. Jashin, I hope she wakes up soon about the prick before she gets really hurt. In the back of his mind he could hear Ari ranting and raving about how blind the girl was and so on. So much so, that Naruto had to close off the link to avoid getting a severe headache. Hokage Tower. Hiruzen sat behind his desk as he listened to each of the Jonin senseis give their reports on how each of their respected teams did. Unsurprising, most of the teams failed their tests, prompting them to be sent back to the academy in hopes for better luck next year. Fortunately, only one severe injury. Unfortunately, the one injured was Kiba Inuzuka. It appeared he had made a rather lewd comment about his sensei's attire and was trapped in a genjutsu that could only be described as nightmarish. The only reason Team 8 had passed was mostly due to sympathy on Kurenai's part. However, the Hokage let it slide. Shino was very adept in his clan's abilities, and despite his attitude the Inuzuka boy was also skilled in his own way. His only concern was for the Hyuga girl, though it appeared over the last few years she had grown into her own person. Team 7 passed. Kakashi stated from his perch on the windowsill, still reading his orange book. Much to the annoyance of the other Jonin in the room. Namely the red-eyed beauty that despised such things. And how did they do? Hiruzen asked with curiosity. Sakura is book smart, though her physical abilities leave a lot to be desired. Naruto is quick to rush into things, and needs severe improvement in his taijutsu abilities. Kakashi reported, as for Sasuke, he is a true elite. His taijutsu is exceptional for his age, as well as his ninjutsu abilities. I see. The Hokage replied. And who gave you that cut on your arm? It was a lucky shot from Naruto. The masked Jonin shrugged. Hiruzen frowned. If he hadn't watched Naruto through his crystal ball, he would have believed Kakashi's report. However, since he didn't feel any malice from the Jonin sensei of Team 7, he let it slide. At least for now. Very well, have your teams report for their first missions tomorrow. Dismissed. And thus, the journey of Team 7 would begin. That's it for part 2 of Half Demon Naruto's Ultimate Harem. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Naruto What If fanfics. Comment below, which bond do you think will change Naruto's destiny the most?